All right, welcome everybody. Good to see you guys. We got, let's see, contractors, engineers, architects, real estate attorney, realtors, property managers, homeowners, a whole bunch of people on this webinar. And once again, thank you for attending. This is my webinar number 47, I think, lost count. I want to introduce Martin Pea. He's the host or co-host, back-end IT guy, making sure that we have our sound and video and everything's up and running. And he'll probably take a nap while I'm talking, and then we'll wake him up after. Um, just a note, information, if you're on Zoom, you registered on Zoom and you're attending this webinar, if you have any questions at the end, you can use the Q&A or the chat feature, and Martin will read the questions and let me know. If you're on Facebook Live, you can post your comments, your questions in the comment section, and we can go from there. If you're on Zoom and you want to talk live, use the raise hand icon and Martin will open up your microphone, and you can talk to everybody. So please note that the information I'll be sharing with you today applies mainly to the state of Hawaii in Honolulu. Buildings code may differ from state to state and county to county. If you're attending from outside of Hawaii, like California, Florida, anywhere in the United States, the main building code that requires building permits is the same, but each specific county adopts their own. And so they can make it less stringent or more stringent or add in more requirements. So that's the caveat. What I'm going to tell you is basically applies to Honolulu City, but you can take most of the information and apply it to whatever city or county you're in, but then double check with that specific county that you're in to be sure. So are you ready to crack the code? And let me advance some slides here. I was talking too much. And so basically, the webinar series we set up is to help building owners, condo associations, property managers, homeowners, anybody related to the building industry, realtors, real estate attorneys, mortgage people, real estate appraisers, and more. So the topic is Building Codes and Permits 2021. Now, the question I ask is, when is a building permit needed? So when somebody asks me that, hey Lance, when is a building permit actually needed? And I say, okay, well, let me give you some information. And they might ask, well, does this certain condition conform to the building code? And I might ask, well, what building code? There's many. And I'll explain to you the differences in the various building codes. But in Honolulu, here is what the law actually states. Okay, you ready for this? A permit is required to erect, construct, alter, remove any building or structure. That's the exact words that I'm reading from the actual building code. Okay, so also a permit is required for any electrical work over $500 and any plumbing work over $1,000. And if a permit is required, you must use a licensed contractor. Now, when do you not need to get a permit? A building permit is not required for painting, cabinet work, and floor covering. Okay, so what does that mean? That basically means that if construction work's being done and it's not painting, cabinet work, or floor covering, then basically you need a building permit. And you might go, wow, that's crazy. Okay, well, there's other factors involved. And I'm here to dispel the myths lies, fake news around town coming from contractors and other people that supposedly know this information, but no one really bothers to check the source and reference. They just hear from other people. And if someone says, you don't need a permit for building the rock wall there, then you think you don't need one because that's what your contractor is telling you, or that's what the engineer is telling you, or your architect or a real estate broker. Okay? Where did they get this information? And what are they basing their statements on? It could be, well, someone told them, or they checked with another contractor and he said, yeah, you don't need a building permit for this or that. But how do you know this to be true? So that's why I cite the source. If you cite the source and the correct reference, you can't be wrong, okay? Unless the building department changes the rules on you and they don't tell anybody, okay? So there's no exemption from the permit requirements if the work being done is only for the purposes of general repair and maintenance. So in other words, let me explain in the simple format for you. You need a building permit, okay, if the work being done is for the purposes of general repair and maintenance, okay? What if the work is not structural? Do you still need a permit? Yes, you do. What if you're replacing like for like you're taking siding off a wall of a house, or you're renovating your bathroom, and all you're doing is just, it's a old tub or old shower tile. You're just removing all that and you're replacing it with new. You're not building any addition or any new construction, structural walls or anything. You're just going in and doing that. So when the work's done, you're not changing the square footage or anything. It's just new building materials. What then? Well, you still need a permit. Okay? If you're doing the work yourself, rather than hiring a contractor, do you still need a building permit? Yes, you do. Okay? What if you're using an unlicensed contractor? Do you still need a building permit? Yes, you do. Okay? What if it's an emergency and your roof blew off? Do you still need a building permit? Yes, you do. Let me explain to you the circumstances. If it's an emergency and your roof blows off, you technically need a permit, but you need to hire a contractor to fix your roof. So the contractor will fix the roof and supposedly apply for the permit the next day or a couple days later. Okay, on the issue of doing the work yourself, and all the examples I gave you, if the value of the construction work exceeds $1,500, okay, that triggers the need for a building permit. So basically, if you look at what's going on and what the cost of construction is today by today's standards and the cost of building materials and the labor, almost every kind of improvement you're doing for construction is over the $1,500 threshold. Therefore, that triggers a need for a building permit. And you might say, well, wait a minute. Nobody gets permits for these things. You're crazy. And I say, yeah, that's true. I'm aware. The building department is aware. A lot of people are aware that the majority of people are doing improvements and they don't get permits. Now, is that the right way to do things? No, but it's almost out of necessity because it takes so long to get a building permit. But anyway, I'm just telling you the facts, and you take those facts and do whatever you want with it. But if anybody tells you, like a contractor says, you don't need a permit, say why? Why don't I need a permit? And let them explain. For instance, you're building a rock retaining wall or a CMU concrete block wall, and it costs $15,000. Do you need a permit or not? Yes, you do. If the contractor says you don't need one, say, well, show me the section of the building code where it says I don't need a permit, because I can show you the section of the code that says you do, and do that for any situation. You're doing bathroom or kitchen remodeling. and the contractor says you don't need a permit. Well, why don't I need one? And you might say, well, cabinetry doesn't need a permit. Okay, well, if cabinetry doesn't need a permit, what other work are you doing? Aren't you doing drywall? Isn't there electrical? Aren't you doing some plumbing work? If you add all these together, doesn't it exceed the value of $1,500 that'll trigger the permit? Oh, well, we don't have time to get one. So most of the information where the contractors and these salespeople are telling you you don't need a permit, they're wrong, okay? Because all you got to do is go look online, when is a permit needed, and go to the DPP website, and it says it right there. What I read to you earlier, it's there in black and white. So I'm not making things up. I'm just telling you what the facts are, okay? That's why I'm saying dispel the myths, fake news around town, and lies. When people say you don't need a permit, they're lying because that's not true, right? But I don't want to argue with them. So what else can we talk about? So all these big high rises in Kaka'ako going up, you know that they have to have a building permit. But what about a single family house where they're doing remodeling or renovation? Or what about the condo? You're living in a high-rise condo and you're doing remodeling of your kitchen or bathroom. Do you still need a permit? Why do we need a permit? No one's even going to see any work going on. It's hidden. It's not like these brand new Kaka'ako buildings. Well, what happens if DPP finds out and you get a citation? Okay, then what? Okay, and what happens if the contractor you hired doesn't even have a contractor's license? Then what happens? Okay, so what happens when work is done? Let's say you have a single family house and you have a patio, and it's actually a lanai because there's a roof over it, but you want to enclose it and you hire a contractor to enclose it, and he says you don't need a permit because we're only putting walls up, your roof is there already, and there shouldn't be a problem. Okay, now what happens when the building inspector goes to the house and looks at it and says, hey, I don't see a permit. Did you get a permit for this? And you might say, no, the contractor that I hired said I don't need one. And the building inspector is going to say, you do need one because all you had is a roof, lanai, and you enclosed it. Now it's becoming part of the house, added to the square footage. And are you paying real property taxes on the additional square footage? Oh, I didn't think about that. Okay, well, the other thing is I'm looking around, I'm the building inspector. I'm looking around and go, hey, your electrical outlets, they're too far apart. It needs to be like 6 feet. And I see one here and one like 15 feet away. This is not to code, and your lighting is not to code, and you don't have enough windows. And then you're like, oh, well, wait a minute. Maybe that's why they didn't want to get a permit. So the building inspector is going to say, I want you to get a building permit and you got to correct all these things. Oh, well, how do I do that? And he says, well, you better call the contractor back up and ask him to help you. Okay, which leads me to the next slide. Okay, and what happens when you don't get a building permit? Now you got to go get an as-built permit. And what is an as-built permit? It's a permit that you apply for after all the work is done. And it's not that easy because guess what? It's costly because you got to conform to the current building code. You need to hire an architect or engineer to draw plans, and you need a willing contractor to sign on as a contractor of record. So the example I gave you about that enclosed lanai, okay, if that contractor is not licensed, he can't pick up the permit. You have to hire a licensed contractor. So let's say the contractor you did hire was licensed, but he says, the deal was that we weren't getting a permit. I'm not going to get the permit. It takes too long. So you hire another contractor to sign the form. And you get another contractor, if you can find one on an as-built permit, and say, oh, I need you to sign on as a contractor so I can get a building permit. And the contractor is going to tell you, I didn't do the work, and you're asking me to sign as a contract of record. Now I'm liable for all this construction. I don't know what's electrical. I don't know who hired to do the electrical or who did the windows and all, you know, what's inside the walls, whether he put insulation. I can't see it. So if I'm going to risk my license to sign on the dotted line and attest to the building department that I was a contractor that built this improvement without me doing any work at all, you got to pay me $5,000 or $10,000. And you go, oh, wait a minute, that's highway robbery. And the contractor will say, well, then you don't have to hire me. Go find somebody else. So it's very tricky. You're going to have to find a contractor that's willing to do that. So basically, you have to pay them to be the contractor who never did the work, but they're taking on the liability. The other thing is insurance too. You know, what happens if there's an electrical fire caused by bad installation and the insurance company wants to go after the contractor that signed to get the permit, but he didn't do any work. Okay, so you see how sticky this can get, and it's very technical in nature. Good luck trying to find a contractor willing to do that. And then that's for the contractor just sign as a contractor of record for the permit. That's not adding on the cost of the contractor doing the work to correct all the deficiencies that he needs to correct to conform with the current building code. Another example is if you buy a house that doesn't have a permit for an addition and you want to get the permit, you have to pay a contractor to go in there and build everything to the current code. You can't say, well, it was grandfathered in because when I bought the house, all those things are built in the 70s and I didn't touch it. I just want to get a permit. The building department is going to say, it doesn't matter. We're treating it as if you're coming in today by today's code, and that's the code we're going to use, not the code back in the 70s when this thing was built, because it's not grandfathered in. There's no such thing as having an improvement grandfathered in when there's no building permit. Okay, moving along. Applicable codes on construction projects. There's a whole bunch. There's a lot of different codes. There's IBC, International Building Code. There's IRC, International Residential Code. There's a IECC, International Energy Conservation Code. NEC, National Electrical Code. It's NFPA 70. Fire Code, NFPA 1. There's a Hawaii Elevator Code. There's a Uniform Plumbing Code. There's an International Plumbing Code. There's an International Mechanical Code. There's a whole bunch more, but that's kind of enough for now. So as you can see, if somebody asks me, hey, Lance, is this construction up to code? I'm going to say, well, what code are you talking about? There's not only one code. There's numerous codes. Okay. Now, is there a difference between an existing building and a new construction code-wise? Yes, there is. So if you look at this photo here, it's of an apartment building in Waikiki. And as you can see, the roof is kind of shot. It's kind of old. So the code that governs this building is not necessarily a new construction code. It's an existing building code. So that's two different codes. But if they're doing renovation or remodeling, okay, some parts of the current code applies, and you could use some parts of the existing building code because the existing building code is more lax and they don't require, in some cases, you can't renovate it up to current standards. So they allow you some leeway. And you can combine the two codes together and maybe get a least expensive construction cost, because if you follow the current code and you're remodeling, it would be cost prohibitive. Okay, so basically that's the difference. So if you have an existing building, there's multiple codes that come into play. Also, the residential code comes into play because this is a residential building. Okay, and then also the International Building Code, which is a standard code, would come into play too. So there could be multiple codes pertaining to one building. Now, what's the consequences of building code violations? And I got some photos here that's interesting. Electrical junction box, instead of, I guess they ran out, and so they decided to use a tuna can. And I think a tuna can works really well, but guess what? It's not UL rated, and there's no stamp on the tuna can saying conforms with the electrical code. Okay, so that's not really a good idea. I thought that photo was kind of funny. And then there's a circuit breaker that they use a tie wire. And I asked, well, you did a pretty good job at, tying the wire to the screw to make the breaker secure. Why did you do that? And he said, oh, well, the breaker kept tripping. And I said, did you know that the breaker is supposed to trip when there's an overload? So by you actually forcing it to not trip, now you're creating more of a fire hazard, because that breaker could start heating up and catch on fire. And the next thing you know, the whole house is going to burn down. Okay, so not a very good idea. So what is the consequences of having a building code violation? And by the way, if they got an electrical permit for this electrical work, they sure didn't do it according to the building code, electrical code. So there's cases where there is a building permit, but the work is still bad. Okay, so the downside to this is you could have DPP issue fines. If you don't pay the fine, they can file a lien on your property. And it doesn't matter whether a contractor did the work. If you're the homeowner, the lien's going to be filed on you, on your property, not the contractor's property. There could be lawsuits, bad publicity, such as abandoned house or a monster house. I know there's abandoned houses where they don't clean up and it looks like a dump, storage, all kind of stuff. And they issued, the DPP issued building code violations, the health department issued violations. And the next thing you know, the neighbors complained, and then your property's on the news. They put your address and everything on the news. Or if it's vacant, you got homeless people living there, all of a sudden the house burns down, and then your property's on the news and they put your name. Here's the owner. We reached out to them and they didn't call us back or something like that. Okay, so monster houses too. If you build a monster house and the neighbors complain and you didn't get a building permit for some areas of the house and the DPP issues a violation, now your name is in the paper and you become on the news. If you want that kind of publicity, I wouldn't want that kind of publicity. Okay, so what else do we have? How about actual case studies? Okay, take a look at this photo here. It looks like, okay, this is one of my job sites that I was on, and you have a construction trailer, and they didn't really grade the lot properly, and we had kind of a storm, and now the job site got flooded. And for me to go to the construction trailer, I need to to use a kayak. What's worse is if I needed to go to the porta potty, how do I get there? Okay, so is this a violation? It may or may not be. I don't know, but it's just a bad situation. So eventually, the water dissipated or degraded like a channel to drain the water out. But this is not a good situation. I got a better photo. Hey, here's illegal railing repair. Okay, so you see the new wood. Okay, these are the pickets. So if you look at the white pickets, okay, that's original, and the space between the pickets is more than 4 inches. So although this deck was built in the 80s without a permit, they didn't conform to the code. That's why a contractor had to go in and install intermediate pickets, and you can see the bare wood in between the old pickets, okay, to make it legal and conform to the code. So why is this railing still illegal? Well, you look at this handrail here, this top handrail. Now they decided to put this trim piece here following the handrail, the sloped handrail, to make it look like a nice design. But guess what? Now with that, you can't grab the rail. And so that's why it's illegal. It doesn't conform to the building code that has to do with railings. The railing, actually the 2x4 railing original is not to the current code anyway, because you can't, it's hard to grab it. Okay, so you see what happens when things are built without a permit and not following. Well, at the time it was built, it was probably following the code at that time, but it doesn't comply with the current code today. And being that there's no permit, then it has to be corrected. Take a look at this. It's a new roof. Okay, so what happened was there is a permit for it, but the permit was based on the roof on top of the wall. Okay, and as you can see, the roof got raised. So I guess the homeowner may have decided, maybe I'll park my car on the road and put my new boat in this garage. So can you guys raise the roof so it can accommodate my new boat? Okay, so although there's a permit for the roof, the permit didn't call for the roof being this high. So this is a case where there is a building permit, but the construction didn't follow the plans and didn't follow the permit that was approved. Okay, so therefore the roof is too high. The roof height is too high, and now they have to go in for an alteration permit so that DPP can approve the higher roof. And the last slide I have is, this is a rotted deck at a marina. And the deck was so rotted that after they tore off the flooring, they had to throw it away and replace some of the wood support and put in new. So the construction of this costs about $25,000. So in this case, after what I told you, would you say that the work here requires a building permit? Okay, good. It does, because it's over the $1,500 threshold. That's why it requires a building permit. And because it is over the $1,500, that triggers the requirement to hire a licensed contractor. So if there's no permit taken out, and let's say they hired a handyman guy that knew carpentry, he didn't have a license, then you got two wrong things: no permit, and the contractor was not licensed. Okay. So that's basically the building code and permit issue in a nutshell. I really wanted to stress the requirements for a building permit because there's so much misinformation around town, and people really don't know the true story and the real facts. And that's why I decided to have this webinar to let you know. Before I take questions, I'd like to let you know that there's upcoming webinars that I'm giving. And here's the titles: Preventive Maintenance, Avoid a Building Collapse, Asphalt Reconstruction, and it's all about seal coating, slurry seal coating, when you need to redo your asphalt. Can you just keep patching the potholes and let it go, and you know, have cars drive over in the potholes and break their axles and things like that? When do you need to actually reconstruct versus, you know, patching? The next webinar would be wood repair. We talk about different types of repair work in townhouses, single family dwellings. And then I'm giving another webinar on flooring and sound transmission issues that mainly apply to condominium buildings, because that's really becoming an issue. It's the sound. You live in a condo and then you hear all these sounds of people walking in the unit above you. And it's like, what happened here? I don't have any peace. Okay. And then in December, we have a holiday party. And you can win prizes. We'll have games and all that. Go to our website to register. The website is askbuildingexpert.now.site. Also, previous webinars that we gave, which you can also go to the website and watch the videos on demand. We also have handouts. And it's interesting because if you miss the webinar, you can actually watch it, you know, on your downtime. So here's some of the topics of previous webinars that we gave: contractor licensing, construction defects, construction warranties, concrete spalling, painting, air conditioning, cast iron drain piping, railing failures, roofing, hurricane ties, reserve studies, mainly for condominiums, premises liability, fire and life safety in high-rise buildings, building safety. And we did one on Florida building collapse. If you go to our website, floridabuildingcollapse.now.site, there's actually about 3 other interviews that I did with news media and one webinar on what I think the cause of the Florida building was, and how the lack of maintenance and lack of money contributed to the failure. So if you have any other topics that you want covered, just email or give us a call, and you know, we can consider it. We have like 24 topics for next year already lined up, and we're working on those now, and we're trying to make it interesting and topics that are of interest to people, and topics that were requested by a whole bunch of property management companies or condo board members. And we have a whole bunch of industry people that give us ideas and things like that. So we'll be happy to consider yours. And the next slide. Okay, so now we enter the Q&A time. And once again, if you're on Zoom, enter your questions or comments in the either chat or the Q&A section. If you're on Facebook, you have to enter it in the comment section of Facebook. we have our phone number, our website, our email address on this slide here, which I'm gonna take away so we can start doing the Q&A. And if you by chance forget all this information, how to reach us, just go on Google or DuckDuckGo or whatever search engine that you use, enter my name, Lance Luke, building expert, and it'll go to one of our various websites. We have about, 25 websites right now on different topics and all that, which we're still working on. So our idea is if you have questions on concrete spalling, you go to our concrete spalling website and it'll give you some information and you can watch a video and all that. So we have this huge idea for reference information to help homeowners, condo owners, property managers, real estate attorneys, architect, engineers, whoever needs the help. That's why we're doing this. So we have a website for basically each topic that will have a video and some text information, and we're here to help. That's why we're doing this. I know I've given these same types of webinars where on the mainland where people are paying between $100 to $400 to attend to get the same information, but you guys are getting it free. So I think that's a good thing. So I'd like to reach out to Martin now and start taking questions.
Yeah, I'm here, Lance. Can you hear me all right? Okay. We had a few questions come in earlier. Let me hit on them. And I actually you brought up some questions that I'd like to ask too. But the first one I have here is, I am remodeling my kitchen and bathrooms in my condo. My contractor said I do not need a permit since I'm just replacing the same items like for like. Is that true?
No, it's not true. And I'll tell you why. If you use the DPP $1,500 threshold, let's add up all that the value of the work is being done, and I guarantee the value of the work is over $1,500. So that triggers a need for a building permit. Now, assuming the contractor's license, you still need to get a permit. Now, if you separate the items, let's say the contractor just goes in and just does the cabinets or countertops. No, you don't need a permit. Okay, but who's going to do that? Because when you take out your vanity cabinet countertop sink, you're going to replace it with a new sink, new plumbing fixtures, a new countertop, and new cabinets. Okay, so be very careful. Don't let people tell you you don't need a permit if you really do, because that goes on all the time. And I know it's just a big hassle to get a permit. And that's just how it is. Now, it would be your decision to not get one, but that's not following the rules. The other thing is that if you're in a condo and you don't get the permit, the condo regulations may require you to get a permit or use a licensed contractor or whatever. So if you're in a condo, be sure to check your condo design guidelines or house rules and all your condo documents. Check with the property manager of the condo and ask them, here's what I'm doing. What do I need to get? Do I need to get approval? Where's the application I need to fill out? And normally there is an application. And if they say no, just say, well, here's my letter saying I'm going to do this, sign on the bottom saying you're aware of the work, so that later on it doesn't come back that I'm guilty because I didn't follow the regulations. Also, if you're planning on selling the condo in the future and you don't get a permit and you don't get board approval, the buyer may say, well, I want to make sure you have board approval for this. I don't want to get in trouble later where I didn't get condo board approval and I didn't get a building permit, because once I buy the condo, now I'm the one responsible, even if I was the one that did not do the work. Okay, so that's just how it goes. Okay, any other questions?
Yes, Lance, we have one actually from the webinar here. It says, regarding the example of the raised roof to accommodate a boat, the permit was taken out, but the permit was not closed. How would the liability be shared if the city closed the permit? Are there examples of closed permits that passed even though the structure was not done according to code?
Okay, interesting question. Now, the example is the permit was gotten, but it was never closed out. Was that it?
Yeah, that was the beginning of it. But then it looks like if the city did close the permit and it was done according incorrectly, are there examples of closed permits that passed even though the structure was not done according to code?
Okay.
It sounds like a shared liability issue, yeah.
Okay, I see where we're going on this. So the example is a permit was taken out, the roof was fixed, the DPP came and closed the permit out, but there's still issues with the work. Okay, there's little recourse to DPP unless it's something really major. You have to go back to your contractor who did the work, and I'm not sure what problems there were, but let's say there were framing problems, or the roof material wasn't put on correctly, or blew off during heavy winds, or the roof was leaking or something like that. So that really is not a permit issue per se. It goes into a construction defect issue. So you would have to deal with that with the contractor. And anyway, if DPP was at fault and they closed it, good luck trying to sue them, or even call them and say, hey, I think you guys made a mistake. You closed this permit out, and it was bad construction. Remember, the building code is based on minimum standards, and the word minimum is there for a reason. It's not, the code isn't there for maximum standards. The minimum standards is actually the lowest standard to pass the test, right? So if something wasn't built to code, it's not even following the minimum standards. Okay, so it's already wrong twice. It's a double jeopardy situation. It could have been built better, doesn't even conform to the minimum standards. Okay, so in this example, the reliance is on the contractor to fix the problem, not necessarily the building inspector. Although you could call the building inspector and say, permit was closed out. Can you come and look at this? And they might look on their records and go, well, the permit's closed out. We have, no jurisdiction anymore to come back. But that's not really true. If they close a permit out and you call them, they should still come out, but they're really busy. DPP is shorthanded. There's a lot of drive-by inspections, a lot of permits closed out where they didn't even look at the construction. I mean, a lot of things going on. So if you got any other questions pertaining to that example, let us know. I'm curious as to what exactly is the problem with the roof, and then maybe we can guide you in the right direction. If your contractor was not licensed, that's a different story, but you could still go after them to try and correct the problem. But thanks for asking that. That's a good question. We got any other ones, Martin?
Yes, Lance, here's one about your monster house. The question is, how do these monster houses get built all over town? They have to be illegal, right?
Well, not necessarily. I mean, there's a bunch of monster houses that I have checked where I thought it was illegal, but they did have permits. So in those cases, although it's a monster house, they did have a building permit. How they got the permit, I'm not sure. But if they conform to the current building code and the zoning code and all that, then there would be no reason why they would not be issued a building permit. Now, sometimes the monster house is actually a semi-monster, and when they start building now, they add more square footage and it turns into a monster house, and the square footage that was added was never permitted. And there's another situation, a couple of houses where they never got a permit, or they submitted a plan, they never got the permit issued, and they started building the house. There's a house on Date Street, and that happened, and they got fined big time. And later on, they corrected it, and I guess they got a permit. So in some cases, there is permits for these, in some there isn't. And sometimes the neighbors complain, but if the zoning allows that big square footage and all those rooms and bathrooms, then it conforms. But if it doesn't, then they, added too many rooms, bedrooms to the house. So sometimes it's tricky. They have one house built and it's like a monster house with 20 bedrooms and 20 bathrooms. And then later on, after the permit's closed out, they go in and add walls and all that. And now you have like an apartment complex there. So that's the part that's not, that people don't like either, because they don't have a permit to, the zoning only allows one house, let's say, and not, 6 units at that same property. So there is a difference, and just be vigilant, and the people in the neighborhood that don't like it, just make sure that the house is inspected and it conforms to the code.
Okay, Lance, thanks. Yeah, I get a couple more questions here that you may have touched on, but let me just re-ask them. The first is, there's a building code for new construction. Is there a building code that has to do with buildings already built? And kind of a follow-up to that is, how easy is it to get an after-the-fact permit?
Okay, well, the code allows for new construction. There's a special code called the Existing Buildings Code. So that pertains to a building that's already constructed versus a brand new building to be constructed. So if you do have an existing building, it doesn't matter if it's a single family, a apartment building, a office building. If it's already built, then there's a way to use that pertaining code to help you with your future renovation work. So it'll be a combination of the existing buildings code and the current international building code. If it's residential use, it's an international residential code. So you would combine all these codes together. Usually you would work with an architect that's familiar with all these different codes and see what they can do. The other question had to do with after the fact permit. And as I mentioned before, it's not easy. That's why I always telling people, if a permit's required, I think you should go get one, because it's a lot of hassle trying to get an after the fact permit. I've had people call me asking me to help them get an after the fact permit because they're stuck. And the problem that I tell them is, you have to find a contractor that's willing to sign off on it. And once they do that, they're basically saying that I'm the contractor that built this, and they're taking all the liability and responsibility. That's why most contractors don't want to do that. You have to either pay them a whole lot of money, or they have to be a relative of yours or a good friend or something like that to do you a favor. Now, I've had a situation where the contractor agreed to sign off as a contract of record on an after the fact building permit, but we had to open walls. We had to cut out new drywall and look at the plumbing pipes and look at the electrical wiring and all that before he felt comfortable enough to say that, okay, the work looks good, and he'll be the contractor that will sign off on the permit. I think we even had to tear off a section of some roofing material to make sure. And all that cost a lot of money that the homeowner ended up having to pay, in addition to money paying the contractor to sign for the permit. So it's not easy. And if you were the contractor, think about it. Would you be willing to do that? You don't even know the homeowner. You just met them. You don't know who did the work, what contractor did the work, what their skill level was, whether they're licensed or not. I mean, I've seen contractors refuse to sign because the work done by for plumbing and electrical wasn't done by licensed contractors. It was like people that they found on Craigslist for way cheaper than what a licensed contractor would have hired. And in the end, they saved a bunch of money. But then now when they have to get the permit, guess what? They're paying more now than they would have paid if they hired licensed contractors to begin with and got a building permit. So it's sad stories. And there's some people, situations I know where to this day, they still don't have a building permit because they couldn't find a contractor to sign off to get one. So, you know, they're exposed now because any day they could get a knock on the door from the building inspector saying, you know, I want to take a look. And after the inspector looks at it, he then issues a violation notice for, you know, building without a permit. And DPP is the local Honolulu building department, and DPP stands for Department of Planning and Permitting. And I think that's a really dumb title, Department of Planning and Permitting. I think the title should be, the name of the agency should be Department of Building Safety, or Department of Building Permitting and Safety, or something like that. Planning and permitting is like the front end where you plan, submit plans, and you get a permit. But their real job is building safety. And that's where the building code comes into play, and the plans. And that's the whole reason why the building code was first created, because there's too many people building without any reference to anything. And it's wild, wild west, and houses were collapsing, falling down, roofs are caving in, structural damage when there's a hurricane, earthquake. And that's why there's the building code today. And it's mainly for safety. It's not to harass you and to make you pay extra fees and all that. It's mainly for safety. So we have any other questions, comments, anything on Facebook?
Yeah, Lance, I guess we have a comment that I'll kind of close with on for you. I guess you just kind of hit on the question I had about the planning is, you know, we've seen in the media a lot of problems with that particular DPP department. And it seems like everything needs permits for the most part. So what's your perspective on I guess expediting the process? That to me is the key. Since everybody needs those permits, there's got to be a better process in order to be able to get them. You know, I think that's the real issue and why we get so much problems now with the department and the process. So your take on how it's done, I guess, in order to really make it more consumer friendly for those who really need that service. Yeah.
Well, it's never been consumer friendly for the past 40 something years that I've been working with the building department. They're always short-handed. There's not enough people. They have lately, within the past 10 years, they have an antiquated computer system. And so when people ask me the same question, I say, you would hire permit processing companies. There's companies that are in existence that help people review plans and submit it for processing. They know how DPP works. They know the management system of the building department, and they know the steps. They have kind of the roadmap or the GPS of working with the building department. And they're specialists in what they do. And for my big projects, I always recommend to my clients that we hire a third-party review person to review plans and help submit it for permit routing to get the permit. That's the fastest way to go. Of course, it costs money, but waiting around costs money too. If I don't use these permit processing agencies and I'm submitting it on my own, and I have to wait a year, to get my permit, I've just lost a whole bunch of money. Because let's say my client took out a construction loan and he got approved and they're ready to fund. I've had a situation where their loan commitment expired because they never got the permit on time and they lost the money. So unfortunately, there's additional payment to pay for specialists to do that. In the old days, back in the 70s, 80s, I used to go down and take the plans myself, stand in line and talk to the plan checker and all that. And times have changed. Now you can't even, it's hard to talk to anybody. You leave your plans there and you don't know what happened to it. And then, next month you call, the following month. And then I heard stories where people are checking and now they can't find the plans. Now they got to resubmit and they lost 3 months. So if you work with experienced contractors, they know how to deal with the permit application process and review and all that. So I would say don't go in it on your own. It's wise to spend additional money to help it along, especially with the high cost of construction today. You can't afford to wait. Every month that goes by, there's money out the window because you're just sitting around waiting. And there's people that are renting because they want to build a new house, but they're still waiting for their building permits to be approved. So it's kind of a sad situation. They keep trying to revamp the system, but it's still the system. A lot of red tape, a lot of government bureaucracy, and that's what we deal with. I'm not happy with the way that the system is there and how it operates. It's just way too slow. And I don't know how customer friendly you can be when there's not enough workers and the system is basically stacked against you, when there's way more permit applications than there are people to process them. So it's just kind of a nightmare that's been going on, and it never changes. So they keep saying they're going to change for the better, but I haven't seen it. I mean, it's still slow. It still takes months and months to get a permit. It shouldn't take that long. To me, if you apply for, let's say, to build an addition to your house, and all the plans are drawn correctly, no errors, because the delay and the building department saying part of the reason why people aren't getting their permits sometimes is because the plans that are submitted are faulty and they got to kick it back and the architect got to make changes. So don't blame the building department if the plans are wrong. But in a best case scenario, in a perfect world, let's say the plans are drawn correctly, it follows the code, and it's submitted to DPP. It shouldn't take them 9 months to get the permit issued. It should take them 2 or 3 months at the most, right? So inherently, there's problems with the system, and I don't know if it can be corrected. I mean, they keep trying, and so far I haven't seen big, large improvement. But do we got any other comments or questions? I see that we're actually out of time here.
No. Well, you've got comments in Facebook. I'll let you go take a look at that. Looks good.
Oh, is it people that need questions answered, or is just
No,
comments?
there's no questions. Just accolades.
Oh,
So yeah.
we like accolades. I wish they would comment more about how we're doing. Maybe throw some money. We like that kind of stuff. But once again, since we're out of time, on behalf of
Lance,
Ask the
let me
Building
just.
Expert webinar series, Martin and I appreciate you attending. Please stay tuned and attend the next webinars. Go to our website, look at future on-demand webinars. Man, we got some good information here. And by the way, you're talking to the national building expert, so I kind of know stuff. So anyway, hope to see you at the next webinar, and aloha.